The Hound and Sansa Stark are one of the most underrated pairs in the entirety of Game of Thrones, especially when you consider the fact that they both kind of act as the catalyst for each other's growth, and it's really weirdly sweet. Okay, it might not be sweet the whole time, but it's really like just chef's kiss. So I recently started a reread of the series, which is super exciting because I now own these. Thank you guys. So I just got to the scene where Sansa and the Hound are having their first like real conversation in the series, and I was shocked to finally like notice how perfectly inverse they are of each other and how this moment really influences them going forward for the rest of the series. Because Sansa and the Hound are polar opposites of each other. Sansa is an idealist, the Hound is a cynic, but her idealism and his cynicism both revolve around the same thing, which is the concept of knighthood. Sansa's idealism revolves around knights and the songs, the stories of heroic acts, and how that has influenced this worldview in which, you know, there are clear rights and there are clear wrongs, and everyone should aspire to be the best. And then in the inverse, you have the Hound, who does not believe in knighthood. He thinks knighthood is a sham. He thinks these vows are bullshit, and he thinks the men who purport to uphold them are all lying to our faces and are con artists. And so in this small scene, because it's only like 4 pages, after the hands tourney where like Robert threw a tourney for Ned Stark, Sansa is being escorted by the Hound back to the castle, and she's very uncomfortable. The Hound scares her, and he is just kind of being like a drunken jerk. He's just kind of like toying with her, and so there's obviously this like friction right off the bat. But then weirdly, in an almost like magical way, they're both able to help the other like bring their guards down, and then simultaneously move from their polar opposite extremes just like a little bit closer towards the middle. Because in their conversation, Sansa is trying to live up to the ideals that she's been taught. She's trying to, you know, utilize courtesy and politeness and act like the lady that she thinks she's supposed to be, and the Hound is having none of it, but is still weirdly charmed by it at the same time. Because Sansa is like trying to make small talk essentially, and is trying to like compliment him on his performance in the tourney today, and he's getting upset because she is referring to him as Sir Sandor, and he's like, no, I'm not a knight, I'm nothing like that, that's bullshit. He then points out to her like, hey, my brother, who is a knight, did some really messed up things because he killed someone that day during the tourney. What do you think of that? Was that cool and knightly? She, tries to come up with something and settles on like, well, he rode very well, because, that's not a lie and it's a compliment, so she's maintained the courtesy without being dishonest about it, which the Hound thinks is really funny. We then get the first instance in which he calls her a little bird because he says, oh, some septa trained you well. You're like one of those talking birds from the Summer Isles. And such a direct confrontation to Sansa, who has, been trying to put on this like polite air despite her own discomfort. She does like break in that moment, and she's like, hey, that's not kind. And that in turn makes the Hound kind of break as well. And because he's so annoyed with her, he like grabs her face, is like, hey, you want to do this like fake nicety bullshit? Look at me, look at my face, because I've seen you looking before and like trying to do the side eye thing because you're so polite, so no, take a real look. And he like holds her face there and he makes her look, and she can't come up with anything. She's uncomfortable. She's like, it does look bad. She doesn't say that out loud, but she's like thinking it. And so she just starts crying because she's like upset, and in a way she's like kind of failed in what was expected of her then. But then in such like a bizarre thing, this somehow softens the Hound in reverse, who up until this point has been like a complete and total jerk, but this is his moment where something about her crying makes him open up, and he tells her all about the story of how he got burned, because his brother, basically when they were kids, he played with one of his brother's toys, his brother burned him, and it was really bad, and everyone lied about it afterwards. And that's super important because seemingly, from what he says in the story, his father lied about it, everyone assumes it's from battle or something, and so the only people who know what actually happened to his face were Sandor, his brother the Mountain, and now Sansa. So something about Sansa shifted something in the Hound, allowed him to open up, and it's weird. I like, why? It doesn't stop there though, because this is like a chain reaction. It's a volley, it's a back and forth, and each of these interactions is helping the other one. So Sansa, now seeing him like be open and honest about like this traumatic experience with his brother, who is supposed to be the knight, who is supposed to be the person that she would idealize. He's obviously the monster here, and Sansa is having to process that in the moment, that the one who spits on knighthood is obviously like the better person in this scenario. And the Hound has gone super quiet, and so Sansa, trying to, like connect in this moment, tells him that his brother the Mountain was no true knight, which elicits this huge reaction out of Sandor, where he like roars it back and is like, yeah, you're right, he wasn't a true knight. And that's the moment where I feel like both of them shift. Sansa has had her worldview shift ever so slightly, in that like, hey, knights can be bad. They aren't like this perfect class of human beings like she's taken it in. And this person in front of me, this hard to look at, ugly, crass person, is better and has just been vulnerable in a way that she responds to. And then the Hound in turn accepts the kindness that she is offering, which is bizarre for him, because he, again, at the beginning of the scene, is mocking this. He thinks it's stupid. He thinks it's an extension of the societal norms that uphold knighthood, these courtesies, these vows, and her little attempt at like, offering him solace, though, he takes it and he accepts it and says, like, he agrees, yes, the Mountain isn't a true knight. Wild. Because him doing that is acknowledging that knighthood is something higher, it is something aspirational, and his brother isn't fulfilling it. Not just that, like, the institution itself is bad, and his brother is just, one of the people in it. No. He's, like, separated the two for that briefest of moments. And going forward, neither of them are quite the same after this scene, because as we learn as the series goes on, Sansa gets progressively, hurt more and more by Joffrey and the Lannisters, while the Hound is more and more acting like a knight. He is the one who defends her a lot of the time. When like in the second book, when the crowd is like rioting and they're trying to get her, he's the one that goes after her to save her. It's moments of chivalry. He's being chivalrous. He is progressively acting more and more like a knight. And then with Sansa, this is her first inclination that, the world isn't as I thought it was. This idealized version that I built up in my head isn't quite real. There's more complexity, there is more gray, and I'm gonna start looking at people and taking in like what they actually are versus what they're projecting. Now, obviously, neither of them make it like the full transition quickly or anything, but this small moment being the impetus, I think, is so like touching and beautiful and messy, and it's so cool.